Today, we're continuing our two-part series on reframing rejection, where my guest, author Jessica Van Roekel, doles out some much-needed wisdom and effective strategies for navigating the rejection we sometimes face or dish out to others. As believers, our responses have to be based on God's word and God's character. So listen in as we conclude our fun and convicting conversation on reframing rejection, part 2. You're listening to episode 20 of the Unperfect Podcast, where we talk about the tension we often feel, living out abundant lives in the now and the not yet. I'm your host, Shelley Sneed, and if you're feeling less than perfect, congrats, you're officially human, and you're not alone. Hope and probably some humor are coming up. Okay, so up to this point, we focus on ourselves, like how we handle rejection. Reframing our mindset and perspective when we experience rejection. But there are probably things we do, maybe without even knowing it, that make other people feel rejected. So what are some things that we do that may cause others to feel rejected? And what can we do instead to lift and affirm them?
Sure. So I think number one is this dismissing other people's opinions and insights. And I don't think we ever mean to do that intentionally.
Sure.
But it's easy to be like, that doesn't apply to me. Or, I just really disagree. So I'm just going to ignore what they just said. This all happening internally. I just think we've got to get curious. We have to stay curious. And when we have a lack of curiosity about someone else's thoughts, especially if they've hurt us or we disagree with them or we've had, maybe sparks, not good sparks in the past. But if we have a lack of curiosity, I think that can make someone feel rejected.
Absolutely. And I love what you're saying. That requires humility, right? Because when someone says something and I immediately think, that's ridiculous, and I see this in parenting too, because, I just want to set my kids straight. What you're suggesting is what all the therapists suggest. Like, you need to have a posture of curiosity. And that gives them space to keep communicating with you. Otherwise, they're just going to kind of shut down.
Yeah. As a parent of teens and young adults, it's scary to be curious, because what if they're like making a decision I don't want them to make, but I'd rather know about it so that we can discuss and pray and all of that. So I think one of the first things we do is we dismiss others' opinions, and how we can lift and affirm them is to get curious. The second thing that I think we do is we're very focused on self. We focus on ourselves far more than other people are thinking about us. It's kind of like I'm obsessed with, my ugly feet, and they're more worried about their forehead. And when we focus so much on self, our own comfort, we can make another person feel rejected because we don't see them. All we see is ourselves. And we're expecting them to be our mirror of ourselves. We're expecting them to affirm us or make us feel good about our weaknesses. And we don't offer them the same gift.
That is so beautiful. And I took a empathic listening course. I actually had a whole interview about this a while back. But one of the things that we learned in this course is that when we're listening to someone tell their story, our natural bent is to just start thinking about our own story. Like, so as soon as you take a breath, I'm going to say, oh, well, this happened. I'm going to jump right into that. So I love that. Take the focus off of yourself. Like, if someone's even talking to you, bring yourself back to the moment of their story so you can really empathize with where they are. Because I would imagine that can make someone feel really rejected when they've kind of just poured their heart out and then you jumped right into what's going on with you.
Yeah, actually, I've talked with people that, I can tell that they spent more time thinking about their response than what I was actually saying. And I did feel rejected. And then I'm probably rejection sensitive because of my experiences with it. And so I think about that. And it's really trying to stay aware of where our headspace is.
Exactly.
But that unwillingness to really listen in and focus on someone else can make them feel rejected.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, and then the third one is, okay, so, and this is so elementary. I really thought that when I became a grown up that I would leave the elementary playground issues behind.
Yes.
I was really
Yes.
naive. Naive I was. And then this seems simple, or simplistic, but the last thing I think that we do to make others feel rejected is by excluding others.
Yes.
It's really hard to make friends as adults, as moms, as women in communities, especially if you're new, or you're moving into a community, or maybe you've joined a new church and all these friend groups are already established. And I think whether we've realized it or not, our exclusivity based on our comfort level with who we've known for so long can make someone else feel excluded. So what we can do is to remember what it's like to be new.
Mm,
And if you've never been new before, imagine what it would be like to not know anybody in the room.
mm.
And so I like to make it a practice of finding the person that is standing off or standing alone or someone new. And I like to draw them out. But I have to pay attention because it's comfortable just to be with the people that I know so well and that I interact with. And that comfortability can inadvertently lead us to exclude someone else by accident. And so having eyes wide open to who's around me is a way that we can go and lift up and affirm someone else.
That is beautiful. I love that. And that is hard to do because, sometimes you just want to be able to relax with
Mm-hmm.
what's familiar.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
This person knows everything about me. And so it really is an act of service to do what you're talking about. Remembering what it was like. And I just got to say, you did this for me because the first writers conference that I think we were both at it at the same. I'm not sure if you were there that first year I was there, but I was just going through a really hard season, and I wasn't there to make friends. I sat by myself in the back. I didn't try to talk to people. I was, that's okay. It was a season I was in.
Yeah.
But when that year that I did meet you, 6 months ago, like you were texting me before every session, where are you sitting? Like, it was just, it was a whole different experience, that conference, when I had friends to experience it with. So you do that well. And
thank you.
That's a good, and just the whole remembering, like, remember when you were in a season, remember when this happened to you. Like, that's another place that rejection can be a tool, right? Because I can remember what that felt like, and I can go out of my comfort zone to keep someone else from having to experience that. What are some ways that our disordered view of rejection, which we've, touched on a little bit here and there, shows up in our lives? Like, what does that look like so we can recognize it?
So perfectionism and people pleasing are two obvious ways that I believe that disordered view of rejection shows up. But also, on the other hand, control and manipulation are two other ways that rejection can show up. And what I mean by that is that we can manipulate how people perceive us, or we can manipulate the situation so we only ever show up as our best or as our perfect version of ourselves. We can also lean towards control, where we're controlling the information that we give people rather than letting them all the way in. We can actually even do that with God. We can, I think it's hilarious. And I can say hilarious because I'm laughing at myself, that I try to hide things from God. Like, I try to control my relationship with God, thinking that, well, I just have to come to him all perfect and prim and proper. But Hebrews 4:12-16 talks about how everything is naked and exposed before him.
Right.
That's very vulnerable. But the way the disordered view of rejection comes up is it tries to eliminate vulnerability, and it turns us more
Mm,
into control. We control information, we control ourselves, we try and control others, we try and control the situation. So say you want to try something new, but you're afraid of rejection. Well, I'm going to be so controlling that maybe I'm only going to be involved in something that I know I'm going to be successful. I'm only going to be involved in something where I know that I have people's approval. So it eliminates risk from our life. And I think God
oh,
calls
yeah.
us to this life of adventure. And he wants us to step out of the boat, step on the water, keep our eyes focused on him, or step into the fire and keep our eyes fixed on him. So again, fear of failure, these
Sure.
are all kind of tied together. I almost think that disordered view of rejection really impacts our life of faithfulness and trust,
Mm,
and that we struggle to trust. We struggle to believe that God is with us. We struggle with faithfulness. And so these behaviors of control and manipulation, perfectionism, fear of failure, people pleasing, attention seeking are all ways that impact our ability to trust God and to believe that he is for us in a negative way.
sure. And, I just think back to the garden. Like we've been doing this from the beginning, right? Hiding
Yes. Yeah.
in our shame. And you're
Hiding.
talking about the
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability and the authenticity. And and God comes looking. That's what's so beautiful
Mm-hmm.
about that picture in the garden. He knows where Adam is, but he still says, "Hey, where are you?"
Yeah.
It's not because he doesn't know where Adam is. It's because he wants to pull us out from
Yes.
whatever we're trying to hide behind. But yeah, it does go back to trust. Like, do I really believe he is who he says he is? I'm who he says he's going to show up the way he says he will. Like, I really can leave my
Yeah.
bare self out there on the altar if he is
Yeah.
everything he says he is, and he's going to do everything he says he can do. It's when it's that
That's right.
but I can see that control and manipulation. Like, nope, I got to have this outcome. Yeah, I can. That's very
Yes.
convicting for me.
I know. I'm convicted right here because God is like, okay, Jess, I'd like you to step out in faith. And I'm like, I don't think I can.
Right.
So I'm convicted today. Just
Yes.
saying.
Yes. Okay, so here is the $1,000,000 question, Jessica. How do we break this cycle of rejection? We want to move on in freedom. Tell us some
Mm-hmm.
practical strategies or whatever. What can we do to get there?
Okay. So I'm going to give two answers to this question, but they are connected. So
Okay.
the first one is we have to be aware of what we're thinking. We have to be aware of how we're responding. If we don't have an awareness of what's going on in our mind, we can't take the next step, which is to stop the thought. So,
Sure.
for example, I'm going into a new place. Let me think. The gym, which I don't do, so that's a terrible one. I was just
I don't
voted on to a
either.
new board of directors. That's something. That's something that I do, and I shouldn't use the gym one because I don't go to the gym.
I
What was I
know.
thinking?
Jim? What's a
But
gym?
I don't know. It's a place, but I do get asked to be on board. So
Okay.
say for example, I'm been voted on to a new board of directors. And if I'm stuck in that perceived rejection place, if I'm not aware of what my thoughts are thinking, I can't stop them. But we can't just stop a thought. It doesn't work that way. If you've ever
Right.
tried to stop a thought,
Yes.
it's like a record player that gets stuck and it just goes round and
Right.
round and round and round. We actually have to replace the thought.
Sure.
So be aware, stop the thought, replace the thought. Well, Jess, what do we replace it with? Well, I write about 4 different lenses in my book. And these 4 lenses are the tools that I use to replace those thoughts that tell me I'm not good enough, they don't like me, um, they just like glared at me and I'm just a terrible person in their mind. Or, boy, the last time I tried this, I was really burned on purpose. I don't know if I really want to step out into this. What if it happens again? So we have these thoughts. Well, these 4 lenses have really helped me reframe my perspective and retrain my thoughts.
Mm.
And I'll just give a brief overview, but the first one is this, I call it humble awe. And
Mm.
it's really having that reverential fear of the Lord, not the fear that I'm a hippo in that arcade game and the person has a hammer and they're trying to smash the hippo's head. Not
Yes.
that kind of a fear, but the fear that, wow, God calls the stars by name and he knows the hairs on my head. Wow.
Right.
He is so amazing. He causes the sun to rise and the sun to set, and yet he cares about the fact that I need him just to get through my day. That type of humble awe, of putting God in first place, of knowing that he created the sky, he created the world, and yet he created me. And he cares intimately about me. And to put him in first place, to seek after his opinion, to make sure that my goal is to please him. That's
Right.
humble awe. And that has helped me replace those thoughts of, especially the people pleasing ones, like, I really want your approval. What can I do to get it? Oh, wait a minute. God, what can I do to gain? I already have your approval. How can I
Right.
walk in that? Oh, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to be faithful. I'm going to have your joy. Then the second one is this mutual delight, is this belief that God delights in us, this belief that we bring him pleasure just how we
Right.
are because he loves us, and how he wants us to delight in him. And the Hebrew word for delight is shafat, and it means to bend toward. And I love that picture, to think that God is bending towards
Mm.
me and that he wants me to bend toward him. And I think of, when we see a cute little baby and we just bend over and we just go, oh, you're just so adorable. You're so precious. I just want to hold you close. And to think that God is doing that for you and for me, that mutual delight. And he wants me to delight in him.
That is such a beautiful picture.
Isn't that a great picture? I think of that a lot especially when I'm going into new situations, or maybe I'm already in a situation and I had a disagreement or difficulty with another person that I have to interact with on a regular basis. I like to remind myself that person, we might have an issue between us, but God is holding me close and he delights in me even if that person does not. So
Sure.
that's how I replace those thoughts. And then there's another one called depending trust, and that trust, and I qualified it with dependable trust because we trust God, but do we believe that he's dependable?
Oh, yeah. That's good.
And he is dependable. He's
Sure.
worthy of our trust. He is steadfast and sure. So I like to remind myself of that. And then the last one is aligned surrender. And
Mm.
we can surrender, but we can choose whether we're going to be aligned with him or not. It's like that begrudging surrender. Fine, God, you said no. Well, I guess, but I disagree with what you did.
Right.
That type of a thing. But to have that aligned surrender where our heart is truly submitted to him and his current will for us in this exact moment. And so
Yeah.
that's how I break the cycle of rejection. That's how I've reframed rejection. And it doesn't matter if we've had a rejection between husband and wife or parent to child. These steps work for all the kinds of rejection, and we can apply them to every rejection we face because it's really aligning our heart with who God is and remembering that we are his, regardless of our interactions with our family members or our friends or coworkers.
Exactly. And I love just to be able to have those lenses and those perspectives. Again, this seems so basic, but we have to be intimately walking with Christ. Like,
Mhm.
we can't surrender with that, aligned surrender. If we read our Bible a week ago, or we're not
Yeah.
praying faithfully. We're not, you talk about in your book, practicing his presence, which that is a big, huge thing I'm working on in my life right now, because
Mm.
I've spent so much time like having a quiet time in the morning. And then I never thought about it again the rest of the day. Like, I really want to
Right.
be in his presence, and that's how he's going to renew my mind. And you talk about praying
Mm.
through the scriptures, praying scriptures back to God. I love all of that. And that's all something that I'm working on, to just reframe my thought patterns. I like to ask my guests this one question every time before we get off, because this podcast is all about living in that tension of the now and the not yet. We talked about it a lot. Like, you can't live a perfect life here on earth.
No.
So we've both tried. So we tell our listeners, Jessica, what is one thing you would, if you could go back and hang out with your younger self, what would you say to her?
I've been thinking about this. I'm glad you warned me that you ask your guests this
Everyone
question.
says that.
Um, I have to tell you, I have four things I would tell myself. I wrote them down, but really at the core is I would go back and tell my younger self to live with arms wide open to people and to God. Rejection has caused me to be so self-protecting that I found myself just walking, with closed heart. No one can see me, but I'm like squeezing my shoulders, like in a defensive position.
Right.
I think I would tell my younger self to live with arms wide open, that
I
God is
love.
big enough to handle any pain that I experience from rejection, and that He doesn't leave me alone in it. But He wants me to, if I live with my arms wide open, that's also a position of praise. It's also a
Mm,
position of vulnerability. It's a position of acceptance. And when I believe I'm accepted, then I can offer that acceptance to other people. And then in turn, I can then truly mean when I say God accepts you too, not just me. So
right.
that's what I would tell my younger self: live with arms wide open.
I love it. That is such a beautiful picture of just risk taking, but also a
Hmm.
position to love. Like, you can't pick and choose, right? If you don't take the risk, you don't get to experience the joys of the love. That's beautiful. I
Yes.
love it. Okay, so tell our listeners where they can find you. And also, if you don't mind telling about, Jessica offers something free for you guys on her website. I'll put the link in the show notes, but can you tell us a little bit about both of those things?
Yeah. So I can be found at welcomegrace.com. And there on the homepage, there's a free offering. It's 3-day Reframing Rejection Challenge. And that's for subscribers free. It's a free gift to my subscribers to my Grace Notes. And what Grace Notes is it's a twice a month devotional that comes out with some thoughts, a scripture, some thoughts about the scripture, and then a prayer. And so I send that out free twice a month. And this 3-day Reframing Rejection Challenge is a downloadable worksheet plus video teaching. And then just with no strings attached on reframingrejectionbook.com, which is also accessible on my website, there is a one-page downloadable gift, no strings attached. You don't have to subscribe. You can just sign up and get it. But it's Reframing Rejection with Wisdom from Philippians. And what it is I give a brief definition of each type of rejection, how to reframe it, and then what scripture you can use to refocus your thought on that type of rejection. So,
Oh, I love it. I love it. I need to go get that
mhm.
myself and hang it on the fridge
Yeah.
or stick it in my Bible. And I get her grace notes. And what I love about them too is they're not super long. Like, it's a kind of concise devotion with the prayer. It's beautiful and it's always very helpful. So y'all
Thank
go
you.
get it. Go get her book, Reframing Rejection. It's wonderful. She is a fun and beautiful storyteller, y'all, with a deep, rich fountain of practical and biblical wisdom. So you can grab that book. I'll also put the link there in the show notes. And Jessica, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today at the Imperfect Podcast.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure. I had so much fun talking with you, Shelley.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a quick rating and review. It only takes a second, and it helps other imperfect people like us find the podcast so they can be encouraged too. As always, I'm praying you have a blessed week and are able to see glimpses of glory in the now and the not yet of your imperfect life. See you next time. Unperfect, a good word for life here in the now and the not yet, mentioned in 1 John 3:2. When life deals us imperfections, we're often quoted Romans 8:28 that all things work together for our good, or James 1:2 that we should count it all joy when we face trials. And while these scriptures are absolutely true, they don't promise lives absent of disappointment or pain. So how do we live in that tension? Well, today I'm offering some help, hope, and healing in Embracing Unperfect, a 7-day dive to fully living the life you've been dealt. You'll receive 7 daily emails addressing obstacles that hinder our ability to live fully in the lives we've been given. Each day offers biblical insights, actionable steps, and additional resources for deeper exploration, and also a recording if you want to dive in on the go. 7 days, 7 minutes, $7. For the cost of a latte, you'll be getting more than a caffeine boost. You'll get a taste of freedom to move from resistance to acceptance, from hiding to authenticity, from comparison to contentment, from control to surrender, from regret to hope, from insignificance to purpose, and from worry to peace. So check out the link to order today, and let's dive into Embracing Unperfect together.